Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on the 29th of September. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, whether you like to listen on NOAA Weather Radio, Marine VHF, or weather.gov/Alaska online. The Weather Info Line is another way to listen in at 800-472-0391. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube during the day. A lot going on in all of those areas to round out the weather message that you can get between your Alaska weather updates here on Alaska Public TV. Here's a look at the hazardous weather situation across Southeast. Flood advisories and coastal flood advisories for a large part of central and northern parts of Southeast, as well as Prince William Sound around Cordova to western Prince William Sound, and also around the Anchorage Bowl and for the Susitna Valley. The Upper Kuskokwim Valley, also shaded in yellow, is a winter weather advisory, expecting on the order of 8 inches or more of snow in some cases there. And then we get into the red shaded areas. Those are winter storm warnings for the interior. Those will go until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Places like Fairbanks may see as much as 14 inches of snow by the end of tonight and early tomorrow morning, and then an opportunity for at least another 1 to 2 more. This is a very impressive snowstorm for most of the interior and continues to snow there now. The heaviest of snow will likely be north of town, so north of Fairbanks. As you get into the Yukon Flats, also the Brooks Range, both the north and south facing slopes of the eastern Brooks Range also under that winter storm warning, as well as areas in the Tanana Valley to the west around Tanana itself, including Denali National Park and also the Healy area. So an awful lot of cold air and moisture have met up here, and winter storm warnings are still in effect for your region. Driving conditions may be difficult and will likely be so through the coming days. So be careful out there and take your time and, well, enjoy a little early season snow if you can. Here's a look at the satellite picture out across the Bering Sea, and you'll notice that we're still looking at broad westerly flow sweeping back into low pressure that's moving through the interior of Alaska now. There's another system, though, that we need to keep our eye on. That one's south of the Kamchatka Peninsula, moving out of the North and West Pacific and moving toward the southern Bering Sea. This is going to spin up into a healthy wind maker, and it's also dragging a healthy dose of wet weather along the front side of that. As that moves northward, expect strong gales to develop across the central and western Aleutians, and then eventually across the western part of Alaska. This will be seen on your forecast charts here in just a few minutes and on the marine maps. So watch for the wind forecast to change quickly for both Wednesday and Thursday, and then we'll continue to see some strong winds at least through Friday and probably in some cases Saturday. This will be our next big weather maker. As we look at the satellite picture across Alaska, you can see our current weather system just wrapped up like a top and a pinwheel right across Prince William Sound and south central Alaska. But that's not where the big stuff is happening. As you know, if you're in the interior, it is snowing to beat the band and has been for a while. This very bright white area and the very sharp difference in that color represents the coldest air meeting up with the highest amounts of moisture and the greatest amount of lift in the atmosphere, building the greatest amount of snow clouds. That is happening right here. And Fairbanks, again, and especially areas north of that, is where that process is working the best in the atmosphere over Alaska. So it's really an amazing thing to watch unfold, unless you're really just not a big fan of snow. Some of us are, especially if you play in the weather office. Out across southeastern Alaska, the front that's moving through is also wringing out a tremendous amount of rain and wind, and with that we get water sloshing up on the beach a little bit more, and we get wind gusts between 50 and 60 miles per hour around the Skagway region today, and many in the northern parts of the Panhandle were very blustery as a result. On the back side of this, we have colder wind sweeping in behind this low pressure system. It's nothing more than a vacuum, of course, and that is bringing in the cold. The big question for South Central and folks in the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys should pay attention to this, as well as areas in the Anchorage Bowl and even the Kenai Peninsula. The big question is, how fast does that cold meet up with the wet air? The bulk of which is certainly moving through the interior, but we still have a lot of that to work through from west to east. Our latest thinking is a lot of this will happen as we head into the mid to late evening hours and during the overnight hours around the Matanuska, Susitna, and especially the Anchorage Bowl regions. We may see that transition over to snow, and for a brief amount of time it could come down enough that it might accumulate on the ground. The trick is, though, that most of the surface conditions are still too warm for a lot of that to accumulate in south central Alaska, and it's not going to snow that hard for that long for it to pile up like what we're seeing in Fairbanks. So we do think we'll see at least a few inches of snow across some of the lower elevations in a few spots for tomorrow morning. The hillsides and some of the higher terrain stand the best chance of seeing accumulating snow. Some of that could add up to 4 inches of snow, especially for places along the Anchorage hillside. Out across the west, we're not expecting that to happen. In fact, many along the Alaska Peninsula will still be dealing with rainfall and showery conditions as we head into the next couple days. And even more so than a chance for precipitation impacts across south central Alaska are going to be the wind on the south side of the storm. So up north, it's snow and a lot of it. Across south central, it's been flooding around the Susitna Valley. Many in the Willow and Talkeetna areas and around Trapper Creek have seen some minor flooding issues there. Some roads apparently are covered up with water. But the wind that develops tomorrow around Kodiak and Homer and around Seward and probably Whittier and Portage will be noticeable. Gusts around 50 miles per hour will be possible, and many of the marine areas here will also have some pretty tough wind, especially through the Barren Islands. Again, you'll see that in the forecast coming up. So coming up for southeast in this weather pattern means more rain and wind for you. And as we get ahead in time, the system that's out to our west will gradually sweep into the west coast and then move across the state once again. So here's the progression of that. Low pressure today analyzed at 972 millibars. That's a deep system, and that is a large vacuum, and Mother Nature, of course, abhors vacuums, as we know from science class. So high pressure is trying to push wind into that void of air across south central Alaska, and it's working pretty well. As we look at the next map for tonight, the low is already filling in, so all that air is rushing in, but it doesn't just rush in, it has to go up. So that's building all the clouds around it and making this into an efficient precipitation maker. The wind is something noticeable as well. Snow will continue across the interior. Rain will change to snow across south central Alaska, and rain will continue across southeastern Alaska as the wind continues to blow in all of those areas. Out across the west, clouds will be the main feature you notice, with high pressure just south of the central Aleutians. Low pressure will work into the western Aleutians. It's at 1,004 millibars out across the western Bering Sea as we get into Wednesday. Low pressure is rising across the North Gulf at 1,002 millibars there, so already a huge change from where we are today. Just 24 hours it's filled in. Low pressure is working across the north. A second front will sweep through the eastern interior and the Brooks Range. With that, more snow may continue, especially on the north slopes there. Scattered snow showers will continue for the Chukchi Seacoast, and rain and snow showers for Kotzebue Sound, and areas just west of the Alaska Range may see rain and snow mix at times, especially on the west-facing slopes. For Thursday, low pressure is dropping out across the Bering Sea down to 982 millibars, and there's two pieces with that. We'll see the front stretch out across the eastern Bering Sea. With that, notice that pressure gradient is tightening up, and that means a lot of wind will be moving through. Strong gales at least, and in some cases for the central chain, some may reach storm force conditions there. A frontal boundary across the southern parts of southeastern Alaska will focus rainfall more and more southward, going into British Columbia and eventually the Pacific Northwest. As high pressure is moving into the western sections of Yukon along the Alcan border, we'll likely see a ridge of high pressure develop into the Gulf of Alaska. This should help to clear the sky away and settle the winds as we get into early Thursday morning. However, as you know, when we get into wintertime, the winds settle down, the skies clear. What happens? It gets pretty cold pretty quick, and in many cases temperatures will drop into the 20s across a large part of the interior and certainly south central Alaska as those conditions evolve and get us into Thursday morning. Meanwhile, warmer air is on the way, as you see out in the west, with that stronger southerly flow. So a lot happening on north, south, east, west, and all around sides of Alaska as we go ahead. Always is. Here's a look at the temperature now in southeastern Alaska today. Highs were in the upper 50s, warmer side of that storm for sure. Prince William Sound in the 40s and 50s. Around the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet, we saw temperatures as warm as the mid-30s. The Matanuska and Susitna Valleys also in the 20s and 30s today. It looked like Gulkana and Glen Allen made it up to about 50, though, earlier on. 28 around Fort Greely, 27 in Healy, and right at 32 in Fairbanks. A very good number to make a lot of snow. 39 in Eagle, 34 for Fort Yukon, 20s for Arctic Village and Anaktuvuk Pass. and 20s for the Beaufort Seacoast. It was in the 30s for most of the Chukchi Seacoast, including Barrow at 33. Kotzebue Sound temperatures generally above freezing today. Nome was 37, Galena 39, McGrath 36 degrees, and Bethel showed 40 with Nunivak Island at 41. Gamble and St. Lawrence Island in the lower 40s this afternoon. Bristol Bay in the mid 40s. Kodiak Island cooler and in the upper 30s. Most of the Alaska Peninsula saw temperatures in the mid 40s. In fact, 46 a very popular number today. 47 for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, and also St. Paul and St. George with Adak at 52. Cooler for Shemya and Atka this afternoon. Overnight lows south of the Brooks Range, where clouds are starting to break up a little bit more, will drop into the teens. Most of the interior will hover in the upper 20s tonight, like Fairbanks at 27. South Central closer to 30 degrees overnight, mid to upper 40s for Southeast. Kodiak 40 degrees and windy. Teens and 20s for the Arctic coast. Most of west and southwestern Alaska will hover in the upper 20s to lower 30s. One of the milder spots will be around Bristol Bay, closer to the freezing point. The Alaska Peninsula in the lower 40s there, as well as the Pribilofs and the central and western chain, though Attu closer to 50 with a high of 54 tomorrow. About 50 degrees for the Pribilofs tomorrow, 47 for Nunivak Island, and low to mid 40s for most of southwestern Alaska. Norton Sound, like Unalakleet, closer to 41. 40 in Nome with the Arctic coast in the lower 30s. Look for temperatures to be the coldest around the Brooks Range, where readings may only stretch into the mid 20s. The middle Tanana Valley at or just below freezing tomorrow, and upper 30s to lower 40s for a large part of south central Alaska, though most of Anchorage and the Matanuska Valley will hover a little bit closer to the mid 30s through most of the day. Southeast looking at highs from about 50 degrees to the mid 50s a little bit further south. Flying weather will be difficult for many areas in the interior, but it should be improving throughout the day. So as you start out your day, watch for IFR, but look for MVFR conditions to develop in many of the passes there. Northern parts of Southeast also expecting IFR by the afternoon, and improving conditions slowly and surely around South Central. But it won't be the visibility that's a problem. It will probably be low-level wind shear and turbulence. For areas in the west, developing IFR across the central and western chain, this will be moving eastward as we head into Thursday, and improving VFR across south central with also improving areas of turbulence too. Now, as we look at pass conditions, expect Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass to be listed at MVFR by late afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should see improving conditions slowly and surely during the day, but they might get stuck at MVFR conditions by mid-afternoon. IFR conditions are expected to start in Rainy Pass with improvement to be noted. Windy Pass also heading for VFR during the afternoon hours. Isabel Pass we expect to start at IFR conditions with improvement noted there by the afternoon. Same goes for Mentasta Pass for your Wednesday. Tanita Pass we expect to see VFR conditions developing by late afternoon there, and some improvement around Portage, but once again the turbulence may be a factor in your decision making tomorrow. Chilkoot and White Pass we expect to see holding at IFR conditions through most of your Wednesday. The freezing levels indicate the cold air is winning at the surface, but already we can see the signs of change across the southern Bering and the northern Pacific as that warm air aloft is pushing northward, but it's moving a little bit more eastward at this point across the southern Bering Sea. Across southeastern Alaska, levels are listed from 2 to about 8,000 feet for the central and southern parts of the Panhandle. Icing potential generally lists the best threat for icing along the Alcan border and just to the west, above about 4,000 feet or so. Now, freezing levels, of course, are a little bit cooler than that for many locations across the interior, but this is where we see the greatest risk there. Light to isolated moderate is possible there. The Beaufort Seacoast has slightly higher levels of icing risk. And out across the west, our warm air moving in means we'll have to climb to above 10,000 feet to find a good potential for icing there. The jet stream shows a pronounced trough coming in from the Arctic with wind speeds there 70 to 90 knots, and this punch is acting just like a little bit of a lifting mechanism, an elevator for weather, allowing those clouds to build, and that's a perfect position again for Fairbanks to see more snow. Another trough is building out across the western Bering Sea. We've seen that on the surface charts already. That's what's moving east, and that's what will reinforce those stronger southerly winds. You see those building in already across the central and western chain. But right now, most of the state is under the influence of that northwesterly flow for the interior, all the way to the west coast and south central. Southeast, holding on to southwesterly winds at 30 to 35 knots, also at 3,000 feet. A broader westerly flow forming across the Kotzebue Sound region right now with winds at 20 to 25 knots, and we see that along the Beaufort Seacoast. High pressures trying to take control of the western coast as well as the central and northern Bering Sea and losing quickly to the next storm wave. You can see those winds at 3,000 feet as strong as 65 knots across Shemya and Attu. Now, turbulence, like I said, this is going to be more of a factor in your decision making, I think, than visibility as we go through our day tomorrow. Watch for opportunities for isolated severe, especially around Prince William Sound, Portage and Whittier to Seward, as well as the Barren Islands and northern parts of Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait. Below 7,000 feet, you're going to have trouble. Out across the central chain below 4,000 feet, occasional moderate is possible. In many areas, especially gap-prone areas across the interior and the west coast and some of the sounds and passes there, we'll be looking at least light to isolated moderate throughout the day. Southeast right now, especially central and southern parts, should not have as much turbulence issues as we go through your Wednesday. Let's look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back in just a few minutes with the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
The beauty and tranquility of our rivers provide the setting for numerous outdoor activities, from fishing on a lazy afternoon to facing the thrilling challenge of whitewater rapids. However, we must never underestimate the tremendous force of moving water, which can quickly turn harmless fun into a fight for your life. The hazard of drowning can appear suddenly and in many forms. It occurs in metropolitan areas and in isolated rural locations, such as canyons, arroyos, whitewater locations, caves, and even storm drains. Some of the most popular vacation spots in the western and southwestern United States are canyons. Each year, thousands of campers, hikers, and other outdoor enthusiasts explore the narrow valleys and gorges found in canyons. However, when raging floodwaters roar through these narrow channels, these popular spots can become death traps.
First came the lawn furniture, and then came the live gas tanks off of campers and stuff, and then came the saw logs and the wood piles, and then came the cars and the trucks and the campers, and cars had lights on them and the people in them, and the lights are still on them. There was people in them, and you couldn't even get close to this because of all the debris coming down.
There's no way to help any of them.
No way, no way. And you couldn't even hear them scream, thank God, because the roar was so bad.
A flood is an overflow of water onto normally dry land. Flooding is long-term, lasting for days or weeks. A flash flood is caused by heavy rainfall in a short period of time, generally less than 6 hours. Flash floods can develop quickly when you least expect it. They can form from intense thunderstorms at the upper end of a canyon, sometimes many miles away. Although you may be in the lower end of the canyon, enjoying sunny skies, danger could be racing toward you at that very moment. Flash floods in canyons are so localized and powerful, they carry boulders, rocks, trees, and anything else in their path. People don't just drown in these kinds of flash floods, they are also beaten to death by the moving debris. Visitors to popular spots like Zion National Park and other canyons need to be constantly aware of changing weather conditions to ensure a safe outing. To alert people of current and potential danger, the National Weather Service monitors our current river conditions and issues official flood and flash flood watches and warnings. Keep abreast of current weather conditions before entering and while visiting a canyon. An arroyo is a flat-bottomed, normally dry stream bed forming a channel, usually found in the semi-arid western United States. They can be many miles long. Most often in the summer months, warm, moist tropical air masses produce strong thunderstorms, with intense rainfall. Arroyos become hazards when rain falls too quickly to be absorbed by the hardened desert ground and quickly runs through the usually dry channels. When this happens, a dry arroyo can quickly become a raging river. Some people choose to camp in the flat, dry arroyo bed. However, rainwater channeled into an arroyo can come from thunderstorms occurring miles away, leaving campers unaware they are in the direct path of a deadly wall of racing water. Vehicles are especially prone to hidden danger in areas where roads without bridges dip across these normally dry creek beds. Be especially careful when in or near an arroyo, wash, or low water crossing. Never drive through flooded roads or washes. You can lose control of your car in as little as 6 inches of water, and 2 feet of water can carry your car away. In recent years, whitewater rafting has become a popular adventure sport. Riding the swirling waters or navigating around standing waves are exciting ways to enjoy the outdoors. There are dangers associated with fast-moving water, but with a little common sense, rafters and kayakers can enjoy a safe day on the river. Swollen rivers from rain, melting snow, or scheduled dam releases can provide for exciting whitewater rides. Increased river heights produce a faster, more powerful flow. Rafters need to know current river conditions to avoid potential mishaps. Usually, it is the novice adventurer without professional guidance who gets into trouble.
Last weekend, when 3 river rafters went over the edge, sucked into water churning so furiously, it ripped off one of the rafters' life jackets.
It's the pressure, tons and tons of water pushing against a human being. The tons of water usually always win.
There's a lot of big waves. There's also the cold water, hypothermia is a big factor too.
It's good, exciting flow right now. You just gotta run it safely and you shouldn't have any problems.
Depending on weather conditions, water levels vary throughout the year, making certain times better for rafting than others. The character of a river may change depending on the height of the river and shape of the channel.
Always turn around, don't drown, and kids are the best at reminding the older folks like me that that is the best idea. My kids have done it myself. Here's a look at the sea ice edge, and grease ice continues to form across the Beaufort seacoast, and you can see that stretching all the way from Kaktovik out toward Barrow. The main ice pack continues to be north, but it is filling in and shifting around. Stronger southerly winds and westerly winds are moving that around in a great fashion right now. The Wednesday forecast for southeast shows winds from the southwest across the outer coast, more of a south and southeasterly flow across the inner channels, 25 to 35 knots at their strongest, with 7-foot seas in the northern Lynn Canal. Seas across the outer coast ranging from 13 feet around the Dixon entrance to 20 feet around the northeastern coastline by Wednesday afternoon. By Thursday, you can see the wind switching around to more of a northwesterly flow as the remnants of that low pressure system are driving south and east. So we get northerlies coming through the inner coast as well as the outer coast at 15 to 20, 10 to 11-foot seas there for most areas on the outer coast, and you could see seas from 4 to 5 feet across the inner coast. For south central, look for winds to be the strongest around the Barren Island, Shelikof Strait, and east of Kodiak Island. We may see higher gusts in this region as well. Stronger gales are expected. And around Prince William Sound, look for sustained winds at 30 knots from the north and west, with seas from 13 feet on the inside to 20 feet on the outside. Cook Inlet looking at winds from 20 to 25 knots. Winds should diminish in all areas as we get into Thursday. 15 to 25 knots in the north and western Gulf, southwesterlies in Shelikof Strait, and winds diminish to 10 knots across the central and northern parts of Cook Inlet by Thursday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, 25 to 35 knots will be seen there for the afternoon. Look for 10 to 13-foot seas across the Pacific and 7-foot seas inside of Bristol Bay. By Thursday, look for a stronger southerly fetch to develop and work its way into the southern parts of Alaska Peninsula. 45 knots there north of Cold Bay with a 12-foot sea south and west of Port Hayden along the Bering Sea coast, and 35 knots south of Sand Point and King Cove with 13-foot seas expected there by Thursday afternoon. Now for the Aleutians. This is where the rubber starts to meet the road a little bit. South and westerly winds developing there for the central and eastern chain, 20 to 25 knots for Wednesday. But out in the west, already responding to that stronger storm system in the western Bering, 45 knots with 19 to 20 foot seas expected. Those shift eastward into the central chain by Thursday. Look for storm force winds to develop between Nikolsky and Atka. These are sustained 20 to 23 foot seas and 16 to 23 foot seas for the eastern chain there on strong gales from Unalaska to Nikolsky with westerlies coming in behind it. As far as the west coast goes, westerly onshore winds from St. Lawrence to areas north of Nunivak Island. More of a westerly flow for the Pribilofs there with a 9-foot sea. As we get into Thursday, stronger southeasterly winds develop. Storm force winds will be possible in the Bering Sea, west of the YK Delta and north of Nunivak Island. Otherwise, strong gales are expected in the Kuskokwim Delta, as well as areas around St. Lawrence Island. We're also looking for storm force winds around St. Paul and St. George with 21-foot seas. Across the North Slope, westerlies, a broad sweeping westerly flow behind low pressure with freezing spray as an issue. Look for 6 to 8 foot seas in all areas, 15 to 25 knots for Wednesday. For Thursday, the winds diminish in a few spots, but we're still watching for freezing spray, and we see an increase in the wind from Prudhoe Bay to Dead Horse to Kaktovik with 30 knots there. Southeasterlies blowing outside of Kotzebue Sound up to 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Otherwise, westerlies remain somewhat light from Wainwright to Point Hope. Let's recap the weather across Alaska. It's snowing across the interior, and it's going to keep snowing for a while. Winter storm warnings are still in effect for the Fairbanks region, as well as many areas to the south along the Parks Highway to Denali National Park and Healy, and northward to the Brooks Range, where many could see storm totals upwards of 7 to 14 inches by tonight in the Fairbanks region, with another 1 to 2 inches possible. Snow will be possible in south central Alaska as cold air meets up with wet air. A slushy 1 to 2 inches in the lower elevations. The best chance for snow, of course, will be on the hillside, with areas seeing up to 4 inches in those regions. Winds and rain will continue for southeastern Alaska. That will be the issue for you tomorrow. As the winds settle down, the rain will continue. Looks like snow showers continue for most of the interior, a light snow for the North Slope, and rain and snow showers for the west with a new storm on the way. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.